Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Jade Valkyrie, joined by everyone's favorite fuzzy co-host, Nemo, and I am one of the co-hosts here at Area of Effect. And this is our animation panel. Reminder, we're still taking donations for our Cause Gamers Outreach, so be sure to check the link on our Tiltify. Our guests today come from a wide range of backgrounds in animation and a multitude of companies within the gaming industry. From past and current work at top AAA and indie studios across the world, we are sitting in the presence of some pretty knockout animators. So let's level up and get things started. As always, we are going to have our pre-prepared questions, but make sure to also use the command question or pop in the Discord for the forms to submit your questions that you want these lovely panelists to answer. So, without further ado, can each of you give a brief summary about who you are, what company you work for, and how you specifically work in animation? And I will start with Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Zerpolo. I work for Blizzard Entertainment. Specifically, I work on WoW as an in-game animator. And yeah,
And Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Veer. I am a mostly 2D animator, and I am freelance. I don't work at any companies, but my most recent work is art director on Cadence of Hyrule and animator on Sonic Mania.
And Pete.
Hi, yeah, I'm Pete. I'm an animator and rigger at Brace Self Games, and I've worked in kids' TV and computer games, in both gameplay and cinematics.
And Morgan.
Hey, I'm Morgan. I'm working at 343 Industries on Halo Infinite right now. Yeah, I'm just a gameplay animator. This is my first job out of college, so yeah.
That's amazing to hear it. Sorry, it seems that the co-host wants to cover up the questions. So our first question out of the bat is, in your career, what has been your favorite thing to animate? And for Morgan, that could also be, student projects. So we will start with Morgan, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So my favorite thing to animate, typically, it's kind of like less of like a singular thing, but whenever I get an opportunity to like learn more about a character and animate according to that, and like at 343 specifically, there's a lot of opportunities to like think about like these classic characters and think about like kind of how to infuse personality, and so like pretty much any way I can use acting is my favorite thing to animate.
I love it. And Pete.
Well, once I was working at outsourcing studio for a little while, and I was fortunate enough to work on some of the super moves on Injustice 2. And it's probably the craziest and pretty mental stuff I've had to animate, like the Joker being someone with a fire extinguisher was a bit crazy. But the just like the whole like pushing the spacing and timing as far as you can, but while still making it believable was like a really fun challenge. And yeah, that was probably one of the best I worked on.
And Paul.
Um, I don't want to use Sonic all the time in these like answers, but there's when we did the DLC for Sonic Mania Plus, we got to add two characters that the franchise hadn't used for like 23 years or something like that, and I got to animate Mighty the Armadillo, who's I already liked him a lot as a kid, and so it was really cool to like bring that character back after 23 years and have him like as a fully playable character. It was awesome to animate.
And Jason.
I'm gonna go with my favorite thing is definitely creatures. I really like creatures, and I've had to animate a lot over the years. I would say like maybe Murky has probably been one of my favorites. He's a Murloc in the WoW universe, and as well as creatures, I really like bosses. So like boss encounters are a lot of fun. So I killed Jaden. I worked on for Burning Crusade and Ragnaros for Battle for Azeroth. Yeah, those have been fun.
This all sound really fun options. And hey, Paul, I haven't heard anything about Sonic, so feel free to talk about it as much as you want at this panel. I have a fresh slate for you. And a next question is, how did you get your career started in animation? Were any particular paths that you take? Do you take a more nonlinear path? Things of that nature. And we'll start with Pete for that one.
Yeah, well, mine was a weird one because I started off to do civil engineering at university, and then I think after the first 6 months of not going to lectures and just making 2D flash animations, I realised I probably made a bad decision. So that's I ended up going to do animation at university, and then after that I went into children's television, and then after doing a couple of TV shows like Abney and Till and Gaspard and Lisa, which was more in Europe than it is over in North America, I think. I managed to get into computer games, but my career wasn't going as like fast as I liked, like working on bigger projects. So I did some online animation courses, like the iAnimate games animation course, and I think after doing that, my career kind of started to accelerate a lot quicker in working on more challenging projects, I think. Yeah.
And Jason.
How I got started. It's kind of a story of perseverance. Um, Back when I was thinking about it, there wasn't any path really. There wasn't. I don't think there was even the internet. To show you how old I am. So at the time, I think Terminator 2 was out, and so I grabbed the credits from that and saw how they did the Liquid Metal guy was done at Industrial Light and Magic, and I had no idea of what this was. I mean, it was brand new at the time, and I just thought, wow, that's pretty cool. It uses computers. I like computers. I want to do that. I want to animate with computers. Um, so I called up the receptionist at ILM and I asked to talk to one of their animators. And for a week, she said no, like no, 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 can't put you back, can't let you through. Eventually, she was nice and she's like, okay, you keep calling, you keep bothering me. I'm gonna give you, if you give me somebody's name, I can maybe put you through. And so I like went through the credits and I got a bunch of names. And finally, I hit on a name that was still working there. And they put me through, and I finally got to talk to one of the animators. And I asked him at the time, how do I do what you do? And he told me about only 2 schools in the country that had a program at that time, which was Ringling School of Art and Design on the East Coast and CalArts on the West Coast. And I happened to live on the East Coast, so I went to Ringling, and I got a 4-year degree there. And out of that, I landed an internship at an old game company called Interplay, and that's where I cut my teeth in games.
And Paul.
Um, my whole path to animation is kind of different, I suppose, because I'm not like traditionally trained in animation. As a kid, I wanted to make comics, and that kind of turned into like, well, I should go to art school, and then that turned into, oh, the art school I want to go to has a game course that is in my hometown. I should go to that, and so I started doing games, and then I kind of out of necessity started learning to do animation because I wanted to draw characters and I wanted to do graphics for games. Um, once I started going in that course, and out of necessity, I kind of taught myself how to do like basic character animation and kind of figured out like, oh, bringing stuff to life in this way is really cool. I should keep doing this, and so I kind of kept rolling. And as luck would have it, this was like 2009, which is just when the whole indie scene started booming, and so there was a lot of opportunity to do 2D animation and pixel art in games. And so I kind of kept going, and that's how I got into the industry.
And Morgan, what did you study? Was it traditional animation or how did you get in?
And when I started my like degree there, they didn't really have a lot of like game animation courses, but there was a lot of game development going on. So like when I was kind of going to school, I'd always try to do at least like two like student projects alongside my schoolwork. And eventually like I kind of ran out of like places to work, so I started looking at like the game development team, and they were completely like, we have no animators, like please help us. So like because everyone was more focused on like feature and like kind of working on more of like film looking student projects. But that's kind of where I got the bug where, oh, I love the fast paced nature of it, but at that point it was already like my last or second to last quarter, so I like there was no time to like start taking like game classes. So I just started like looking at like internships and like just trying to like find a way in. And yeah, that's when I got my internship at 343, and I've been there ever since I graduated.
Amazing. Again, following up on that, what is some advice you think that you would give to somebody looking to get into games animation? And I'll start with you, Morgan. Particularly since I guess you're the closer with this. Were there any things that you did during college or applying for your internships that you think really helped you get that job, that role?
Um, I was very annoying, similar to like Jason's story about just like calling people and like trying to like I guess just get a hold of people who like capture your interests in a genuine way, where it's like I didn't know this was technically networking, but I was like on LinkedIn and I would look at someone's like reel and be like, this is an amazing reel. I have to ask them how they did this, or like what is your thought about that? And like so I would just be reaching out to people nonstop and like just kind of getting information from professionals. And like it was just kind of amazing that it's like you can just do this, like you can just harass people on the internet for like career advice. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole and like made a bunch of connections. And when I kind of went to start applying for my internship, I realized I already knew half the animation team from like at 343 from just like talking to them online. And so my first day was kind of weird where I was like, oh hi everybody, like I know all of you.
I know you.
That's my advice is like network, but like let your interests drive you, so you're not like one of those like kind of annoying students that are like kind of look at my reel, would you like can I get a job with you? So it's like it's kind of towing a line is kind of my advice on how to get started, is like networking and keeping your eyes open and casting a wide net.
Course, and being genuine, you know.
Yeah.
Pete.
Yeah, well, I really have to agree with what Morgan's saying, because it's something that I never did that I really wish I did earlier on, which was to like not be afraid to approach professionals and not put them like on a pedestal. What Morgan was saying was like, as long as you're contacting people in a genuine way and not just expecting critique every day from them, then almost everyone I've ever worked with is more than happy to help anyone that asks questions or ask for advice. But I mean, I suppose I should add something else, which is make sure your reel is amazing. Get that network and just make that, like, if you can do an animation set, which for one character that portrays a consistent personality, and bonus points if you can get that into an engine, like you'll be flying with job applications.
Paul.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's pretty much got it covered. I think like networking is the most important one, especially like coming from the indie side of things. Um, what really helped me was going to indie events, going to like a GDC, or like GDC is like kind of like an expensive one, but going to like other indie events like Amaze Berlin or Fantastic Arcade at the time, and meeting people in that community um, really helped and really opened a lot of doors for me in terms of like, oh, your work is like super cool. We should make something together. And even if that doesn't work out, then at least then they have like a contact. If someone contacts them for like animation work and they're like, oh, I know someone, they can refer you. And game jams, I think, are a really good way to at least get a foot in the door in terms of releasing anything, because it doesn't matter if you make a game in a weekend. For those who don't know what a game jam is, in a game jam, in a short amount of time, you try to make a small game. So that can be a week or a weekend or whatever. But you try to make a game in that short amount of time. And what's useful about that is that you learn the entire process of making a game from scratch to release, at like a really rapid pace. And you meet people that you might want to work with later. And it's a really fun way of networking and learning more about the industry.
Jason.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. Definitely networking is huge. I'd say also don't be afraid to start on a smaller project. Like everybody, I know when I was in school, everybody wanted to work at Pixar or some of the other big companies, but take something small. If you have an opportunity to work on something, take it. Any experience is good experience. Also, don't be afraid to use networking sites like LinkedIn. There's a lot of animation talk on there, and people post job openings all the time on there. And there's also some online resources for job postings in animation specifically that lists like all the companies that are looking for animation work. So try to get yourself connected to one of those job posting listings. That'll help you know where to submit your reel and things like that.
Is that the Chris Main spreadsheet? Google
Yeah,
Docs.
that's one of them. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic.
yeah.
And what was that one again? So just in case people can catch it one more time.
Yeah, Chris Main he's actually a freelance animator. Then he put that spreadsheet together. I worked with him on Waterproof. He's a fantastic animator. But yeah, he puts it together, and it's if you just search Google for Google Sheet animation job sheet, it'll come up. It's fantastic, really good.
That's amazing. And jumping back to something that Jason and I think actually everyone mentioned this about reaching out to people that you just think their work is amazing. Do you particularly have right now any projects or people that are your big animation inspiration? Or one that comes to mind right now. It may be hard to rank them.
Mm.
And I'll go with Jason for this one.
Yeah, inspiration, like there's a lot. More than I can maybe, but I'll just flash this up here really quick.
Amazing. I love it.
It's like my current list of people who have somewhat touched me over the years and I've gotten inspiration from. So yeah, obviously the big ones are on there: Disney, Hayao Miyazaki, Milk Call. Those are big names. But there's a lot of other people that I've worked with that also contribute to my knowledge pool and have touched on me. So I try to keep that list around, and whenever I need work on chopping down my ego, I just pull it out and I look at all this and I'm like, okay, shut up.
It's almost like a vision board with like everybody on there. They're just like, yes, that's what I want to be.
I'm
I
trying
love
to
it.
do, so it's always evolving. I keep adding, but yeah, it helps to keep me humble.
What about you, Pete?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite a lot. I used to watch a lot of animated shorts before I really got into animation. So things like the Animatrix and loads of crazy animations by some Japanese animator called Tomioka Satoshi. They're just like late night, staying up late at night as a kid, and it really got me to realize that really animations like spans such a variety of mediums. And I mean, more recently, I don't know if anyone's seen any of the Mindbender stuff. They're like they don't do games; they do like shorts and trailers, and they're more of an outsourced place. But they have this like incredible, like malleable aesthetic. It would never work in games, or it might do one day. But they have so many deformers. But like they have these rigs that they can just move body parts around, and it just I, I've never seen it before on computer animation. It's just so fresh, and it's just something I'd love to see more of. Yeah, that just blows my mind.
What about you, Morgan?
I kind of have a similar kind of feeling as like what Pete just said, where it's like I kind of gravitate towards like things that make animation seem like such like a wide kind of just there's so many possibilities for like the medium that it feels like it gets you more excited. So it's not just like a kid's medium, it's kind of like could be anything. I feel like when I look at like Goblon's student films and like I think it's called The Line, it's like a small like 2D animation studio where it's just like anytime I see like anything with from them, I'm just like, oh, this is so fun. Animation's so cool, and I
Yeah.
kind of get like hyped again about my job.
Goblins
And I
is
think
so
like for specific animators, I mean they just don't miss. They're all good. But like for specific animators, I think I really like Richard Lico and Frank Abney because they're like really tenacious animators. Like they're really good at what they do and they're passionate and they also like kind of I love how they like share their knowledge and like that's when I was in school I was like looking at their like breakdowns like GDC talks and just like absorbing so much and I think that's kind of like where my brain goes for inspiration where it's like those animators that like are good and then share how good they are.
That's amazing. And Paul.
Um, for me, it's hard for me to like name specific animators. But when it comes to pixel art stuff, which is what I do the most, I look a lot at like SNK or Capcom, like all their old games, like King of Fighters and old Mega Man games, Mega Man Battle Network, Mega Man Zero, um, and there is a an old studio called Dimps, and it was a studio formed specifically from people who used to work at Capcom and SNK. And Dimps did all the like Sonic games on the Game Boy Advance, and they did the Kirby games on Game Boy Advance. They did what else? Anyway, they made a lot of really beautiful pixel art stuff. So specifically for pixel art, I look at those studios. Um, Animation as a whole, I really like a lot of the stuff that Studio Bones does. So they did like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and they're doing My Hero Academia right now. They did Mob Psycho. Their work. They did my favorite of all time, Eureka 7. Like their stuff is just so consistently good, and they have such a good there's just such a good feel for like all the different parts of animating. They're not just good at like characters, they're also good at like mechs or environments and stuff. So
You're definitely talking my language right now because I'm a huge, huge weeb, especially Mob Psycho and My Hero.
it's very good, yeah. And
They're
then
very different, like really
yeah,
art, but they're still really good in what they do.
yeah, for sure. And then Science Saru is another studio that I really like. They did Mind Game and Kaiba and all these like
Oh.
really beautiful animated movies and series.
My
Yes,
game
much
is
respect
amazing.
to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So our next question is, and I guess this could also piggyback off of, talking about your different animation studios that you like and like what you like about them, is what are some less noted or less noticed, less noticed parts of animation that you feel make the biggest impact? Like some animation secrets or things, tiny things that make a huge difference. And let's start with Jason for this one.
Specifically about animation, I think like hands and add a lot, like especially fingers and hand poses add a lot, and that gets unnoticed. I think it's one of the smaller details, but I think it adds a lot. And also things like follow through, like with the hair and the cloth. I think that can bring some cool style to your work. But I think the biggest thing for me is that goes unnoticed is all the back end work that goes into animation, like the tech and tools team, the rigging department, all the work that they do really makes a big difference on the work that I do. So, and I think they're kind of like the unsung heroes.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
And Pete, if you want to elaborate on that more.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I can make things move, but like getting all those animations to play really nicely in Engine, that's just it's incredible what some of these tech animators can do. Yeah, it's a very difficult thing, and like if you can make an animation look good, like on in Maya, just playing through, like that's what we focus on. But then getting those to work well, blending between one another, that's a real difficult thing to accomplish, and that's where a lot of the tech animators, like you say, they are unsung heroes of that. But some of the other things, like something in games that when I see it in a game, it really blows my mind. Naughty Dog, really well known for this, is environmental interaction. Like if the player goes through a door frame and they just touch the door frame, like that character is now within that world. Like it's a living, breathing world rather than it just being just an object in like a CG model. It really does. For me, it really makes it feel a little bit more of a tangible thing. That it's like one world. But yeah, I think that's me.
And Paul.
Yeah, I think even in 2D games, a lot of the tech stuff goes really unnoticed because there's not in the kind of 2D that I do and like the more old school 2D animation in games, there's not a lot of like rigging and that kind of stuff going on. Like a lot of it is in the hands of the one animator, but implementing it in game and making it feel good to like hit stuff or to even just walk around is like a whole nother story. And uh, a lot of programming is involved in that, and I think that really goes unnoticed. Like you can have really nicely animated games, but if they don't feel good to play while keeping that animation quality, then it's kind of worthless, if you ask me.
Yep.
Yes. And Morgan.
My first thought when I heard the question was that like kind of because I'm working on like some sandbox stuff and like first person animation, it's kind of like it's kind of a weird thing where it's like if you don't notice the first person animation, that probably means it's really good. And like kind of something that's like it's it's tough to think that way where it's like you kind of want your work to be so good that it's like forgotten and not noticed at all. And when it is bad, it's very noticeable.
Yes, it's definitely something that now I'm gonna like think about because I do remember there's some games where I've seen the first person and be like, this is so jarring. Can I please change my POV? So now I have to reevaluate the games I'm playing now. So thank you for that, Morgan. So actually is a great. I think Morgan's just reading ahead here. For the next question was, what are some pitfalls to look out for your career? So we have making sure if you have first person, if it's really noticeable, then that's a no-go. But are there any others? And we'll start with Paul for this one.
I think one of the big pitfalls, especially when you're starting with animation in games, is not considering that it's a game. And so you have all this like lovely animated stuff and all this like anticipation in your animation and like a million frames specifically for like 2D stuff. And then it goes into the game and the game is completely unresponsive and not designed to be a game with that much animation going on. That's I think a really big pitfall. Like in games, what you want is your if the player presses a button, they need to have instant feedback. And some games are designed around this, where there's more animation, like a Dark Souls or a Monster Hunter. But in general, you want your animations to be really snappy at startup. And so I think a thing to consider when you're starting in games is like, okay, maybe if I want this to be really nicely animated, maybe I can put all that stuff at the end of my animation because usually there's more room there to do that kind of stuff rather than like putting it all up front. Like if you punch in a fighting game or something, usually what you'll see in Street Fighter or whatever is that there's a lot of time after the punch where they like settle stuff in the animation, and that will make it look smooth anyway. So yeah, I think that is by far what I've seen and what I've experienced is like a really big pitfall when you're just starting.
Morgan.
I think the biggest pitfall is not being able to manage burnout and not being able to manage work-life balance. And it's kind of not a fun answer because it's like it takes a lot of work, but it's what I've seen the most people I've graduated with leave a creative career for. They're like their brain gets just totally squeezed by school, and then they go to a studio that maybe doesn't like respect work life, or just really just squeezes their brain even harder, and then it turns into them not having anything to give, and they're just like, and without knowing that you need to have like a life outside of work to draw from to make your work better, they
Yeah.
kind of think like, oh, I just suck now, and then they quit. And it's like if students can like leave school knowing like I need to like protect my inspiration and my like health outside of work, they'll go farther and like be better creatively and like better mentally. I feel like I don't know, like at least when I was in school, we were kind of taught like sleep when you're dead. You'll like when you get a job, you'll get to relax, like which is usually not the case. So it's like if you can learn that early, that'll take you farther than, you know, maybe someone more talented because they're kind of getting juiced, you know, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah, my answer was specifically about animation, but that is actually the number one pitfall. It's not knowing when to stop.
Yeah, it's very easy to get caught up in that. And Jason.
I would say not getting buy-in early. Like a lot of times when you start out, you want to show your idea and you want to make it so good so you'll never get any feedback, or it'll definitely be accepted. Let me make it so nice that no one could possibly think this is bad. But it's better really to show it like as soon as you can in the roughest form, so you can get that like buy-in early. You can get people on board with your idea. It may be beautifully animated, but it might be the wrong idea or wrong direction. And so you've done all this elaborate work and you have to scrap it, and that can really be soul crushing. So try to get that early buy-in, show some early blockouts, even if it's just horribly rough and the timing's terrible. Just get something out there to show and get it in and working and playing and prototyping. It'll save you some headaches.
I've learned that the hard way a few times. Yeah, I pretty much previs everything now.
At least until you get like a really good working relationship, with your lead or director, and you kind of are always on the same page. Once you get to that same page, you know what he wants, know what to do, then you can, put more time in before you show it. But until you establish that direct trust, it's better to just go early.
And Pete, anything else to add?
Amazing points. Mine's probably on more of a like career-wise. I think a lot of people suffer from during the interview thinking it's all about the company, seeing whether you're the right person for them, but really it is the other way around. And I think people should have a really strong understanding of knowing their worth, and not just jumping into any like. I mean, this comes from a very privileged opinion. If you can turn down a job, but like if you can not just jump at a job, but like wait to see whether it is the right one. Sometimes, like early on, you don't have that privilege. You have to go to get, like what Jason said earlier on today. Like any experience is a great experience, but as you get further on into your career, you really want to start like picking and choosing those, and making the right decisions for where you want to end up going. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Mm.
That's like another thing when I started interviewing for internships and jobs like right out of school and like in school is that I would ask like what's like it like working there and like what would it be like working there for a new grad or for like a woman and like if I got some of them were kind of like they didn't know how to answer and they were kind of like oh well and like it kind of gave me a bad feeling and I was just like I'm just gonna skip on that one. But yeah, like for 343, they were like excited to tell me that it was like, a really great place to work. And that was the first time I had that. So I was like, okay, this one.
Yes, that's definitely also happened to me interviewing and asking like those like maybe some people are uncomfortable, but they're real good questions to ask. And how a company responds is a very good indicator about how it actually will be.
Mm.
So that's definitely a great takeaway for the audience. And now we're gonna go more into the audience questions. Our first audience provided question is how do you know what personalities to apply to your animations? And what teams do you work with for your animations? And we'll start with Jason on this one.
That stuff's usually set by design or story, like we'll have a little bit of a bio on the character or what, the creature is supposed to be doing in the world or what the personality of the creature is. And then we do some research. Usually I'll do a little research and come up with some, videos or something, and then throw that back at the designer, and say, hey, is this kind of like about what you were thinking? And they'll be like, yeah, that's perfect. Go with that. Or they'll be like, no, that's terrible. Else.
No thanks. We don't want that one. And Paul.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. What I like is when designers or programmers just make something with like temporary graphics. Show me what you want this thing to move like and like what you have in mind in terms of like if for instance if it's like an enemy or a boss or something, put it in the game so I can see what its patterns are, and then I can decide from that, oh maybe it needs to be this kind of thing or it needs to be based on a certain animal because that really brings the idea across immediately when you see it, that kind of stuff.
And Pete.
Yeah, I mean everything that everybody's already said. Yeah, but the one thing I would say is once you've got that kind of character formed, there's a really good talk by she's an animator she worked on Destruction All Stars. She did a great talk about using Google and YouTube's algorithms to like create a personality. It's fantastic, and she really recommends searching for it. Something underneath the cat's hat, I think, or something like that. And she discusses about because like music is a really big thing for provoking emotions, and I feel like your playlist, and what she also says is about your music playlist kind of does define your personality. So she tries to do this thing where you create mood boards of each character, like images that inspire them, and then add in a couple of tracks into YouTube of like music that they would listen to of that person, and then just let that playlist grow like through their algorithm, and then like see Google searches like start changing to be that person. It's a really fascinating. I did try doing that recently on a project, and it just really helped me get into the mind of that character a little bit more deeper. Yeah, it blew my mind when I saw that talk. It's fantastic.
Morgan.
Yeah, I have a similar answer too, where it's you kind of get like a rundown of the character, but then I always try to like kind of get the characteristics and maybe like the story and think like what do I know that is also an example of this, or it's like who do I know that's like this, or like another character from another series that's like so like for like Master Chief and stuff, I was like, oh, he kind of reminds me of like the gunslingers from like Dark Tower, where it's kind of like very cool and good at what they do and like minimal movement and like so there's certain things. There's always like a way you can draw from your own like understanding and interest and say like this character is like that, and so it's like that connection is kind of what can bring in your personality to the character as well while still keeping it in character a little bit.
Yeah. And this question, there's another Wow, sorry, they kind of just jumped around at me. The second question is, do you prefer animating sequence from scratch, from reference, or from mocap? And what is different about each one? Yeah, I think that's what it says. Each method, exactly. And I'll start with Paul.
Hmm. Well, I've never done mocap stuff because my work is primarily 2D.
Mhm.
Um, so I most of the stuff I do is completely from scratch. But on Sonic, for example, we worked from reference. We had all the old animations from the Genesis games, Sonic 1, 2, and 3, and we used those as our base, and then we touched those up and added extra frames of animation. Uh, Tried to make them smoother that way, and also because it was kind of like a celebratory game for the franchise, uh, we looked a lot at like old Sonic artwork and looked at like, oh, maybe we can use some of these poses as like key frames for the animations. So a lot of the stuff is actually based on old artwork and stuff. Um, but if we look at something like Cadence of Hyrule or Nuclear Throne, which is another game that I've made, um, that's basically all just from scratch. I've never, I don't think I've ever worked with even like rotoscoping or something like that. Just I kind of just eyeball it if I have to.
And Morgan.
I always work with some kind of reference, like typically just reference I take myself. And if it's like a motion that like I can't do, I'll I'll just try to find a YouTube video or like something adjacent to it. I think that's something that I did as a student that kind of set me back. I like personally where I would try to just barrel ahead and say like I have a picture in my head, I'll just like use that. But it's like there's always gonna be something that you don't realize, or it's like whether it's like a weight shift that you're like, oh yeah, that actually would happen there, but like you don't know it unless you either like act it out yourself or like painstakingly like flip through a video of someone else doing it. So I'd always recommend like trying to work with some kind of reference if you can. And like for the mocap thing, I think pretty much the difference with that from what I can understand is just like you kind of get your like blocking as either yourself doing it if you're in the mocap suit, you just kind of get that blocking ish idea out by actually physically doing it. So it's like you are your reference video in some way. But yeah, just for a blanket statement, I'd always say try to work in a reference to your workflow if you can. It'll make it better, usually.
And Jason.
Yeah, I would agree. Reference is huge. I always try to shoot reference if I can. Sometimes due to time constraints now, I don't, but that's only because I've had many, many years of doing it, and I feel very, very comfortable maybe doing it without the reference. But certainly early on in my career, I always shot reference. It's huge. It helps you see a lot of things you wouldn't normally think about, weight shifts and subtle things that add a lot to your character. Um, as far as if I could choose anything, it would be keyframe animation from scratch. That's what I do now. I really like it. Um, and I have used mocap before on projects, and it definitely has its pluses and minuses. Um, and I thought that was a good learning experience as well. That having mocap and being able to scrub and see how the character moves taught me a lot about body mechanics. So just analyzing the mocap as I was like cleaning it up and whatnot really taught me a lot about animation on humanoid characters.
And Pete.
Yeah, very similar to Jason. One thing I will say with reference is tying back into something that Jason also said earlier was about getting buy off. Like once if you've got your reference and you send that off, that it's a really quick way to get buy off from your lead or your supervisor, and that's really really helpful. And it just gets you to the endpoint a little bit faster, especially earlier on in your career. I've used quite a bit of mocap before, mainly in cinematics stuff, and the workflow for that kind of thing is you already have your believable motion, and it's a lot more cleanup. You're doing a lot more adjusting of poses and going through and getting rid of like slight bits of noise. So there's less of the performance coming from you if you've been outsourced that. But then some places where I've used motion capture, like on the Injustice 2 stuff, you can only mocap so much, like, and when you're pushing it for the timing and stylization, you end up actually just finding your key poses from that mocap. So there isn't one way to work with motion capture. Like, there's so many different ways. And to tie back to something that Morgan said before with Richard Lico, I think he's got a fantastic view about mocap. Even if for some people, even like if you have the resources at your studio to get motion capture, just having it as a reference and not even using it to animate with, like, it is a fantastic form of reference in itself. That's it.
And our last question, in the before we wrap up, is particularly directed towards Morgan, but if anyone else's experience relates to this, feel free to answer too. As Morgan mentioned that she works on a sandbox team, which I am guessing is like weapons. What are Oh my gosh, the question got cut off. What are the differences in approach when you're thinking about animating humans versus animals versus weapons, etc.?
Well, like the sandbox is like just like first person animation, so like kind of how you interact and use like the weapons and stuff. But the way that I approach it differently is like it's like kind of what I said earlier, where it's like first person, you have to think about like how to make it seem efficient and like as not noticeable as possible, and like kind of keep the hands out of the eye line and like have it be appealing but also not distracting. Whereas like when you're animating like a character or like someone in third person, you can kind of like animate more closely to like what you maybe learned in school, where it's just like you get to be a little bit more appealing and just like think about just classically how animation should look, kind of be like the star of the show a little bit more. Yeah.
Mhm. And Jason, I know earlier you mentioned that creatures are one of your favorite things to work on, so.
Yeah, they're challenging. You, it's I think in some ways it's a little easier because you don't like everybody knows what a human should look like, and so if a human doesn't perform something exactly right, like you might not know exactly why, but you can feel it. You're like, oh, that doesn't look right. That doesn't feel right. But with creatures, I think it's a little more forgiving. Sometimes you can, get away with a few things that might not be exactly perfect to the creature, but it looks okay, and it's forgiving that way. But I like them because they're, you don't see them every day. Like when do you see a big octopus killing things and, Ragnaros made out of lava, I mean, like, that's fun for me. So.
And Pete,
Sorry, I got a little bit lost because I thought the question was about first. I haven't done any first person stuff. I have animated
uh,
tentacles though, and I do enjoy animating tentacles.
yeah,
I
I
used to
think the
hate it.
question got it's like almost a two-parter. So sandbox working, but also any differences between animating humans, animals,
Yeah,
weapons.
yeah. I suppose with see, I find with creatures I have to, because with humans I tend to I've been animating for 12 years. I feel a little bit more comfortable animating people, so the amount of reference I use gets a little bit less and less. But with creatures, I really find I have to really analyze the reference and not just like reference of what shot I'm going to do, but trying to get a little bit more idea of that creature, like little mannerisms that might just add a little bit more, that like little things like birds and how they twitch and just little things that just add that little bit more. I think is where, and flying, it's so difficult, I'll get there one day.
And Paul, any extra things to add from like the 2D side?
No, not really. I mean, I think everyone's got it covered. I think, yeah, like with stuff like creatures, you can just like go a little bit weirder and a little less realistic, and you can push it a little bit more, I think. Or even like, yeah, like Jason said, there's little things that no one notices, like um the way that like tails move on like cat-like creatures, for example. They don't, the way they look in games is usually not how that works at all in real life, but it looks better, so that's fine.
I love it. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for the rest of the questions, but where can anyone watching this panel or have any more questions find you? LinkedIn, social media, or whatever. Also, your chance to shout out anybody if you want to. And we'll start with Jason
Yeah, I'm definitely on LinkedIn. It's just my name. You can reach me
and
there.
Paul.
If you search Paul Veer on Twitter, you'll find me. I try to answer like any questions that I get. So if you like tweet at me or email me about something, then I'll likely get back to you about it. So
And Pete.
Yeah, Pete, just search animator Peter Thornycroft. Contact me with whatever way you find. I'm more than happy to help, like with critique or anything.
And Morgan.
LinkedIn's good for me too. I think I have all my other stuff linked from LinkedIn either way. So if you find me there, it's just my name as it's kind of spelled here. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate your time. I had a great time in this panel. I'm sure the chat did too. So thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very
thank,
much.
thank you.
And I also like to make the great announcement that we have reached our charity goal and we have actually exceeded it. So I'd like to thank everyone. We are at $3,174 as of
Wow.
last time that I checked personally. And we still have prizes left. So go ahead and put the command donate into the chat and reap those benefits and enter for those prizes. And next up, before we reach our commercial break, I would love to shout out our sponsors once again for making us all possible and giving us those lovely prizes that we can give out to you for being so generous. First is Allmed. Allmed runs and supports a nationally sponsored community, collegiate, and convention esports events across the US since 2015. Their esports teams are also currently ranked Division 1 top 10 in the North American field. Corsair, the leading global developer and manufacturer of high performance gear and technology for gamers, content creators, and PC enthusiasts. And Miami University. Miami University's games and simulation major, with specialties in game art, game design, and game development, it provides individualized career pathways for success. And hey, you can even go there if you're interested in this lovely animation panel that we just had. They are a national leader in esports, including a new online master's degree in esports management. And we will be back with our video editing deep dive after this short commercial break. So stick around.